Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me at benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcast because People of Distinction is a nationally and internationally syndicated show because of listeners like you. Our shows are available across all major podcast distributors as well as YouTube. And if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. We appreciate the support. Continue to like and follow and sit back and strap in because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Dr. Thomasina M. Portis. And we're going to be discussing her amazing book, Through the Eyes of This Black Woman, Continuing to Rise. I love that. So powerful. People, in addition to this book, you're going to want to check out her other one called Music Matters, a universal language and ministry. Now, both of these fantastic books are available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the regular online book resellers. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, and get lost in them. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out the fact that Dr. Portis was brought to our network by one of the best publishing firms in the business. People, you already know I'm talking about City of Books. So if you're a writer out there, you've gone through your process creating your masterpiece, and now you need help moving the book you just developed. Contact City of Books, people, because this is exactly what they specialize in. You're going to want to head on over to cityofbooks.com and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is a true pleasure to have Dr. Portis here on the line. People, right there in the title, we're going to be seeing things through her eyes, all right? But this is layered. Whether you're looking through her eyes, you're looking through mine, you're looking through a whole host of others, I promise you there is going to be alignment in the things that she is saying that so many of us can get behind. And the unfortunate truth is there's so many of us that also do not want to get behind. Right, we're going there today, people. We're going to talk about some things and things that are very, very much apparent in our country. I mean, listen, this may be going on across the world in varying degrees, but we're going to stick here to the States. And we're going to talk about the importance of accurate and transparent history being told of all races, right? Not just one. We're going to focus on them all, but especially from the black culture, especially contributions to this great nation from that community. And as a black man myself, man, listen, I'm not going to, I'm going to try it. Let me say, I was about to say I'm not, but let me not go that far, okay? I'm going to try not to preach here today. I'm going to try not to go on these lectures. But man, let me tell you, as a black man myself, I remember vividly growing up. And it was interesting because the only history that I was ever taught that had any reflection of my culture, of people that looked like me, was all about slavery, right? And I remember I was like, man, I don't know exactly, but I believe we did more than just what we served in bondage. I believe we contributed more. And it wasn't until I remember distinctly my freshman year in high school, I took an African American history course by, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Mr. Martin. I don't know if you're still teaching, brother, but you were amazing. The impact that you left on me all these decades later, and I can still remember you by name. Ooh, let me just not. The way he left the impression, the way he opened my eyes to the vast, vast contributions that African Americans have contributed to this country, contributed to this world. My goodness, I was yearning for something and I finally found it, and it unleashed something in me that really satisfied this curiosity that I was able to take and run with it and take a whole lot of African American history courses after that. People, listen, Dr. Portis knows her thing. This book is covering so much. And I promise you one thing, we're going to barely scratch the surface here today, but by the time we've concluded, you're going to run and purchase your copies because you're going to understand, we need to open our eyes to certain things. And there is a lot more of our history that is being kept from us. And then when we look at the current climate that we in and how there's a lot of discussions happening about, the Department of Education and how things are wanting to be reorganized to, showcase history and teach things in a certain way. Here's a pause right there. I'm going to let that go. Dr. Portis, welcome to People of Distinction. We are thoroughly looking forward to this. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. And I'm excited. Having heard you a few minutes ago, it makes me even more excited to get into this with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. Portis, listen, this is a pleasure and an honor. I really do mean that. Thank you for comprising this book. Thank you even more for being here with us to discuss it. Before we go into this fantastic narrative, start off by giving us a little more information on yourself and your background, please.
I'm Thomasina M. Portis. I was raised in the South Carolina specifically. Mm-hmm. And because I am more than 70 years old, I was raised in the segregated South. Mm. And after having been there for the first 20 years of my life, then I moved into the Washington, D.C. area, which is north and south, and stayed here for about 56 years. I taught in the District of Columbia Public Schools and retired there as a assistant superintendent. And from there, I moved on the national and international level as a consultant in education. And that was really a pretty broad experience for me over the years. And then after about 35 or 40 years into education, I moved into Christian ministry. Mm-hmm. And so my background is both from the spiritual and the social aspects of our lives as Black people. And what I've seen over the years has just been absolutely astounding in terms of our growth and the ways that I believe that we have maintained a degree of invisibility, not because of who we are, but because of a system that has pretty much made that be our reality. Mm. And I felt that I needed to do something that could be a contribution to our history from my perspective, because I have been blessed to live so long and to see so many recurring things. One of them, however, was the missing what I call the tabletop talk that our families would have after we moved into mainstream America, maybe probably more around the 70s. You said something today that was very interesting to me. You said you had a Mr. Martin who taught you Black history.
Yeah.
Well, I was probably still teaching in junior high school when the curriculum was able to include Black history. And it was a very, very interesting time because I realized so much was missing just in general information from the children that were coming to our schools at that time. And I should say students. And I'll tell you why I make that distinction in a minute. But the students that were privy to the curriculum were not necessarily engaged. They didn't know much about who they were generationally. And there seemed to have been a stigma attached because their perception of who we really are was absolutely not who I knew that we are as a people. Yeah. The contributions that we have made over the years, and that absence of information has really been, I guess, probably the impetus. And it has just boiled over and over and over the years. And I decided that after having been a part of the civil rights movement as a foot soldier, I was not major leader, but I was a foot soldier who was pretty much engaged over about a 4-year period. I felt that my children need to know, and their children need to know. Yeah. And I shouldn't be just closed just to my children, but to the children of America. And then, as I was doing the research, I realized everybody needs to know, because one of the things that really prompted this that I'll tell you about was talking to two gentlemen one day about where I have lived and my life experiences. One being a very, very wealthy man who had lived in the country all of his life, and another who was not from here but had moved in after he was 12 years old. And I was talking about the systemic realities that have been impacting in our generations as Black people. And I used the term systemic racism, and I was told that there is no such thing as systemic racism. Well, I was so taken aback, I just did not know what to do with myself. I said, are you really telling me that? And then I said, oh, I understand. Your telling me that would be like my telling you there's no such thing as a yacht. And he said, what do you mean? There's no such thing as a yacht. I said, you told me no systemic racism, is that correct? He said, yes. I said, and I told you there's no such thing as a yacht, is that correct? He said, yes. I said, do you understand what I mean when I say that? He said, no. I said, neither of us has had the experience. I've never been on a yacht, and you have never experienced systemic racism. And unfortunately, you've not been told about it in your books and the books that you handed down to us. So the invisibility of the systemic racism to you is my life reality. Yacht is yours. Do you understand? And so he got quiet and he said, you know, Dr. Portis, I'd never thought about it like that. I said, I think that may be the truth for many people who are well-wishers, because I certainly am not saying that every white person in America is a subscriber to systemic racism, but I am saying that you are the recipients of some of its attributes that we that we don't have.
Yeah.
And then we got into conversations about that. So I think that was those two things: the fact that it's been missing in our history and the way that it was received in the experience that I had when Black History first came into the curriculum in the late 60s. And now here I am in the 200 and maybe 21st year, having some person tell me who had worked on Wall Street for probably 12 or 14 years, maybe longer than that, tell me there's no such thing as systemic racism. You know, and then the irony of that, just to not know history. If it were not for the cotton that came from the South, there would not have been a commodity to begin Wall Street to begin with. We are the reason you had a Wall Street commodity in 1772. This is wow, you know. So it allowed me to see that so much has been missing from who we are as a people of integrity, of ingenuity, of genius. And so much time has been spent trying to water down who we are and to take on what I call the Taney syndrome, making us 3/5 of a person so that states can have rights, you know, those kinds of things. So you've used us, but we are not. How does that happen? How can you use me as a person and then declare that I'm not? That, you know, it's just been a lot that I have just mulled over through the years. And then realizing that the tabletop that my grandma gave me and my mom and my dad and all of them, that is missing. It's missing. And so I think that we need to have something that speaks to that. And I have no idea how far-ranging this book may have, but whatever it is, whoever picks it up, I hope that they will see that they're talking to a person who believes that we have the same creativity, the same potentials of all other human beings, and we certainly have been major contributors, which speaks to what I believe is not only our benevolence, but our integrity, because we could have done things very differently than we did during the times that we have been enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many times that we could have done some real atrocious things to the masses, and we didn't do them. We did not do them. And I don't think it was out of fear. I think it was out of integrity. That's pretty much, in my mind, a reason to sit for 3.5 years and work on a document that speaks to both the history in general and my history specifically, especially for my children. And I don't want to be that what's the word I want to use? I don't want to be that selfish.
Right.
I want the world to know who we are, because we are a beautiful people, and we are major contributors worldwide, but especially here in America.
Yeah, Dr. Portis, thank you for that, because listen, there is so much powerful pieces of information that you just relayed. Couple of things that I want to just quickly make a note of, because I do think that it's important. You know, you talk about this individual who didn't recognize systemic racism, and this is a conversation that I've had with those around me, and similar to you, like, I know a lot of people outside of the Black community that deny systemic racism. They're good people. These are not racist individuals. When I hear you say that, it makes me think that you know, I remember my thesis for graduate study when I was completing, I touched up on this notion of how racism in America has become so tightly stitched, so tightly woven into the fabric of this country that it's now undetected by so many people.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly correct.
And this is why books like yours.
I think if there was a genius I think that if we were to call it genius, the genius of what has happened is
diabolically genius.
Yeah, that's good. A diabolical genius act was to create it through a governmental structure that gave rise to the perpetuation of systemic racism in a way that it was seamless. It was seamless.
It's what is difficult about it is because it happens in so many different areas, right? And then when you start to point it out, if you're talking to someone that has not had the same experiences as you or I, has not been involved in communities where it is very apparent to us, well, now it almost well, now you have a victim mentality, Benji, or you're just trying to pass the buck, Benji. Well, no. The writing is on the wall. You just got to understand how to read it. And, you know, you look at something as listen, monumental. But when we talk about just slavery in and of itself, and when slavery came to a close, what was promised to the enslaved people? 40 acres and a mule, right? We've heard that phrase up and down and sideways, backwards, forwards. And of course, we've never received reparations. And listen, I just want to make sure that I put this out there. I don't think it's needed, but just in case, because you understand the time that we live in. I am someone that has always identified as a Black man, and I have my parents, but my parents are technically from the Cape Verde Islands. So technically, when we're talking about reparations, my family, myself, I would not receive those, and understandably so. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be given. Just because I can't receive it doesn't mean I don't feel like people should be given it. But when we talk about the wealth gap in this country between different communities, and especially the African American community, can we stop and understand and realize what 40 acres of land could have amounted to generations later? We are talking about generational wealth, people. That was something that was promised to the slaves that was never given. And then when you see this disparity in wealth, that is just one. We can talk about the educational system. We can talk about the laws that were placed where, slavery had ended, but then you have all of these asinine laws that are created to now put anybody that breaks a law, but we know that it was heavily skewed towards the African American community, that the moment you break a law, now we're putting you in prison, and now because you're back in bondage, we get to treat you as a slave. The title isn't there, but we basically get to treat you as a slave because now you're a property of the state because of a crime that you've committed. People, the rabbit hole runs deep. This is a riveting conversation that I'm at the edge of my seat and I'm trying to bite my tongue here. The book is called Through the Eyes of This Black Woman Continuing to Rise by Dr. Thomasina M. Portis. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a whole host of other places where you got to go. You know, Dr. Portis, I'm curious with this next question here. We already know that there has been a lot. You articulated it beautifully when you first began by talking about how, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact words, but it was something along the lines of how our black communities, our African American communities, in the contributions that we have made are pretty much invisible or have been invisible to a certain degree, right? Well, when we're operating from that standpoint, and we know that the achievements in fields like science, arts, politics have all been, you know, again, unless you really go and search for it, like from my experience, I didn't start to receive those things until the 9th grade. And it was only because at that time I chose to take an elective course. It wasn't even mandated. It was an elective for African American history that I decided to take and then finally opened my eyes to so many things. Well, how has the erasing of this, or I guess the hiding of these achievements, helped push forward or contribute to systemic racism and the perpetuation of stereotypes that we now see?
Oh, man, this could take us forever. Here, let me go back to something that you said. Let's go back to
yes, please.
I'm going to say the impetus, the birth.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of the way that our country is run, it's run on laws and rules and acts, right?
Yeah.
Well, most people don't understand that when it comes to the things that are pertinent specifically to black people in America, for the most part, there have been acts. One of them, for example, is the Voting Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
Acts are temporary. They are fluid. And they are left to the discretion of a people in Congress to make a decision as to whether or not, after the years have lapsed, if it will come back up to be voted on again. So there, even though we were told that we have a right to vote, we have never been given the opportunity to be a part of the inclusive law that speaks to the right of citizens to vote. And so black Americans have been subject to the Civil Rights Act. And if you will remember, John Lewis tried to enact a John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
These are temporary things that are made in front of our faces, and most of us don't understand because in our history, we don't realize that we are given temporary rights through this country. That's a systemic, racist, ideological fact that is perpetuated over and over and over and over. So there is this tentative ethos about who we are and what we are, what we can do. You said something else that I wanted to address. You talked about the 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, yes, we deserve it. We ought to have it. That's a given. But what I will not do is spend my time on a discussion about what I deserve, and I will spend my time talking about the things that have kept me from being able to do what I can do myself. Education in America has not been on par. Let me give you an example. In South Carolina, when in the 1970s, when they were trying to desegregate, I never say integrate, but to desegregate the schools, there was a meeting in one of the counties in South Carolina where the white parents were just opposed to their children going to the black schools. Now, why were they opposed? They were opposed because the major conversation that they brought to the table that night was the schools were so ill-equipped. So the question was, who would see to it that they are equipped? When the state funds come, who receives the state funds and how are they distributed? Are they equal? Are they equitable? And the answers were no.
Right.
So the same people who made sure that we did not have became spastic when the law said that we had to be desegregated, because they knew that they had kept those things away from us. They knew that the education was not up to par. They knew that the standards that they had were not the standards that they had allowed to go into the black schools. They knew these things, but it became a generational behavior that wasn't even thought of by them because that was the practice.
Mm-hmm.
So now we move into mainstream America, and you say that we're not qualified for your jobs. We don't qualify. How many times have we not heard that we didn't qualify?
Yeah.
And it had nothing, and the implication was that we were incapable. Absolutely not. The reality was we were not provided the same education. If you look across the board where there are examples of who we are as a people and our capacity to learn, our intellect is synonymous with anybody's intellect, whether you're Asian, whether you're white American, it does not matter. Mm-hmm. We are of the same caliber of human beings who have the intellect. But what stymies us is the social kinds of restraints that they put on it, that they want, that have been ours to absorb and then still to maintain. So who's the genius here? Who is the genius? It has to be us. Because despite these incumbencies and these roadblocks, we are still continuing to rise, mm-hmm. which is the second part of the book.
I love this. I absolutely love this. Again, the book is called Through the Eyes of This Black Woman, Continuing to Rise. Dr. Thomasina M. Portis is the author and the name that needs to be recognized. While you're at it, check out her other book, Music Matters, A Universal Language in Ministry. It's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a whole host of other online resellers. Check out her personal site, though. That's drtmp.org, as well as a bookstore available in Toronto, where the book is also sold, and that's called Maple Staple Bookstore. I love that name. I mean, it just rolls off the tongue. I love it. Listen, people, we're diving into the thick of it, all right? And we're going to keep it moving here. Dr. Portis, my next question, I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are with regards to this, because we have seen in recent times, well, I guess it has been exasperated in recent times, where there seems to be an all-out assault on the American education institution and the way that things are being taught, specifically with regards to history. Now, we've already started to talk about, my background and the things that I was learning in history class growing up, as well as yours. Well, now we see a lot of things happening in recent times where, be it things as absolutely asinine as slavery being skewed to be partly beneficial to the enslaved individuals in terms of the trades that they picked up. I don't understand how that was even ever brought out, but that was there. We saw as recently as Donald Trump making his claim about students that are being discriminated against because of the way, like CRT and the way that certain things are taught. Now, I do want to make sure that I point out the disclaimer here before we even go into anything. People, I am by no means ever advocating for any type of oppression or discrimination. As a black man in this country, believe me, I've faced enough of it. I've learned enough of it. I would not then go and churn it around and advocate it for someone else. So I understand that. And please make sure that things are being understood correctly. But I want to hear it from you, Dr. Portis. How do you address the argument that teaching the full history of African American experiences, including systemic oppression, creates division? Because that's the argument right now, is that when we address it, we are now dividing individuals rather than focusing on the true issue at hand and understanding the community, in this instance, the black community that it is oppressed, is really what we're trying to explore. Talk to us about that argument and how you address it.
Let's take it from CRT, critical race theory.
Yes, please.
That is, I think, a buzzword for creating an avenue for us to eliminate, again, any form of information that has to do with any ethnicity other than the supremacist move on making sure that power and privilege remain in the white ethnic group. So however you slice it, it comes the same way. You want us to believe, us meaning anybody who is not a part of that consciousness. Yeah. You want us to believe that to speak to who we are as a collective, beautiful people, collective meaning red, white, black, brown. If you speak to us and the value each of us brings to this American experience, then it's in some kind of way causing a problem for the white supremacist ideology. And it does, because it speaks to a more equitable and equal way for us to live versus the invisibility of most of us, or the minute way in which we perceive the contributions that are not ours. Again, let's remember that systemic racism takes on all forms. And the less you talk about the qualities of us collectively, the more you talk about the superiority of one group. Yeah. And the more you make that argument, then the less consequential each of the others of us are. And so it's that. Don't forget that the root to this is maintaining any kind of information that allows the supremacist ideology to be real. And I want to point out one thing. I'm not talking about all white people. I am not, because I don't believe that this is applicable to all white people. But I do believe that what is applicable is a lack of information about the inherent qualities that black people have, that brown people have, that the native Indians have. I think that's a way of supplementing for us our own qualities as it begins to continue to elevate what they would choose to have everybody believe. Yeah. And as long as they can keep the majority of the information centered around their contributions and even imply that they're giving us something, we give you and then we take back affirmative action. We give you and we take back, and then when we look at ways to make sure that each of us has good health care, for example, you take it back and then you say that we are not responsible people. You give us reasons why our jobs cannot be equal to the jobs of the white people, while many of us know that we train those white people that you give the jobs to, you know. And so it's that whole ball that continues to roll, and that rolling continues to the ball itself is systemic racism, and it continues to roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. Now, the reason I believe that there is such a fanaticism at this point is because it is reported that by 2044, the country will not look as white as it looks now, that the majority of the people in this country will be more like brown people. Well, you know, when you look at history, you look at slavery, there are a whole lot of brown people there too. Mm-hmm. And we came here black and they were white, but now brown is here. And I'm not talking about the ethnic group brown. I'm talking about black people who ended up being the children of the slave masters. So there is so much convolution in this whole conversation. And until we start really seeing the value of each of us and stop trying to denigrate the personhood of any of us, we're going to continue to have this problem.
At the very start of your answer, you were saying how, CRT, critical race theory, has become a buzzword, I believe is how you categorized it. And people, there is so much that we can reference that terms that have been demonized and hijacked in a way, right? We talk about, let's talk about BLM. Let's talk about Black Lives Matter, right? When that came out, it's something that we can see understanding the meaning for it. Now, the backlash with Black Lives Matter is now this counter protest of all lives matter. Well, hold on a second. When did anybody say that Black lives matter more than anyone else? The phrase is Black Lives Matter. We are simply trying to create an awareness that listen, again, you may believe differently, but I think enough has been proven and shown throughout history that Black lives appear, if you want to fight me on it, that's fine. Well, okay, formulate your argument. But if you look at history, it appears that Black lives seem to matter just a little bit less. We're not saying that it should matter more than any others. We're just simply stating that we're here too and our lives matter. And if you, again, look at the history on the way America as a whole and the white community, like she said, we're not saying all white people are this way. I know plenty of amazing white people. It is not about a particular ethnic group. It's about a particular community that, for the most part has been white and has been privileged enough to be able to do that. You look at our next president of the United States, his motto that he ran on, make America great again. Here's the thing. If he would have stopped at make America great, man, listen, not any one of us would have been able to have a problem with that. I can get behind that message. But hold on a second. He added in that again. Well, now we got to stop and we got to think, right? And I don't think it was by mistake. I do think it was a strategic thing put in place, and most likely not by him. I don't think it was his genius that came up with it, but somebody in his circle came up with that phrase, and it's directed to, and again, that now is me just speculating because, of course, I don't have the information, but there is a very specific community in which they are trying to speak to by saying, make America great again. Well, it causes you to now to think, when was America great to begin with, and for whom was America great? It's another one of those buzzwords, right? It's another one of those phrases that causes us to reflect. But I promise you, we can come up with a whole host of them. Woke, that is now another phrase that has gotten demonized. When we think about woke and where it began, it's solely about waking up. The premise to acknowledge certain things that have been perpetuated. But it's gotten demonized and caused so much extremes that now you look at that word and you're like, I got to stay away from it as much as possible. There's things happening behind the scenes.
There's a portion of the book where I speak to woke, and it's during it's in the area where I talk about the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And I say that we do have an understanding of woke. We do. And I think that woke for us, though, means that we are very cognizant of what is happening. We have always been very conscious of what has been happening to us. So let's talk about Black Lives Matter. If you want to look at it from that perspective.
Yes, please.
When we say Black Lives Matter, we're saying Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yes.
There was a township there that had indications by all rights of being a very flourishing Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was totally demolished. Black Lives Matter. And then you say that we are a country who looks at the economic structure. The economics was there. Businesses were there. And the height of our intellect, all of those things were demonstrated there, our culture. And yet, there was some fabrication made, and the next thing we knew, it was all burned down.
Yeah.
Now, Black Lives Matter, so you burn them down. Now, then you put a freeway over the grave sites. Black Lives Matter. Really? So what are you talking about when you say you are concerned that we are eliminating other ethnic groups? Where do we find that history? Black people have a problem with their health. Number one, because many of the housing developments are placed next to the sewage, next to railroad tracks in almost any and every city. So our health problems are in direct relationship to environmental aberrations that we don't take care of, because climate change is not real and these things do not really cause problems. So we're exasperating, we're exaggerating the problem. Yet, that's what that's where you place us. You tell us that we ought to be homeowners. You raise the rates. There's always a reason that we either don't qualify, and it's either because we don't make enough money, but we don't make enough money because we don't have the same figures on our paychecks as our counterparts. So we don't make enough money. There is always this tension that creates a problem, and then you get angry because we are telling you that we matter too. Mm-hmm. Here we are in 2024 saying we matter. Ralph Ellison wrote Invisible Man how many years ago? And here we are still seeing traces of that invisibility, and we are telling you that we are not. Mm. So when we tell you we are not and we say that we matter, then it must mean that we mean that other people don't matter. Absolutely not. We're telling you that we must not have mattered. We didn't matter in 1619 when you brought us here in masses. Mm-hmm. And what you brought here were people who were a potpourri of any group of people you would ever see. You brought the intelligence, the intellects here. You brought the educators here. You brought the scientists here. You know, my grandmother used to tell me all of the time that she knew of a story about an astronomer that came from Africa. And when he came, he ended up in the rural area of Richland County, South Carolina, and he showed the relationship to soil development, soil preparation, and the lunar system. A black man sharing this with people who had no clue as to what those relationships looked like. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because he had to, it was because his integrity said, if we are going to make sure that the soil is worthy of producing at its highest rate, these are the factors that we must engage.
Yeah.
He didn't have to tell that story. He didn't have to share that.
He could have allowed it to continue to be brown all year round rather than green and flourishing. He could have, but that isn't what he did. And then you turn around and act like he didn't do it, and so now you're saying Black lives don't matter.
Right.
So you can't have it both ways. We either matter or we don't matter. And I'm suggesting to you that anything that you find historical in the United States of America, you will find that there was some connection, especially in the earlier years, particularly after the 1600s, that we were a vital part of. And I think that our people need to know about the level of integrity that our foreparents brought and have instilled in us, so that we will see how, and then we can see for ourselves that there's a perpetuation of a character that is not deficient, but that has been neglected by a subset of America who wants to pretend that we are not. And that's just the realm of it. And I'm not saying that that's everybody. God knows I'm not. In fact, I would say that it is a probably a minority, but it is such an infiltration in the psychic that we would have the outcome that we now have for this past election. But while I'm on that, let me say this. Thank God this isn't new to us. So we don't have to fold up, curl up, maintain such a high level of anger that we become ineffective, because this is some more of the same. Make America great again. We'll either say that each of us has played a part in making America's greatness what it is, or we have all failed in having done so.
Right.
But it isn't again without each of us being a part of it.
Dr. Portis, my follow-up question that I want to go into, what role do you think that media and pop culture have played in reinforcing a skewed version of American history?
A lot. I think, and I would have to say that I think that it is true for media, because, let me give you an example.
Yes, please.
During the last election, there was so much focus on two people, first Biden and Trump, and then Harris and Trump, and so little concern on a major manuscript that will be the manifesto probably for a while now, called 2025.
Yeah.
We spent too much time, and I don't know of a media, I don't care where you turned, where somebody wasn't talking about the person, rather than looking at what the issues are and seeing how there was going to be a change and a turn of events that would create the kind of angst that now exists in America. And the unknown for so many people, which is, again, the reason I appreciate this conversation, because I want any person of color to understand that we have been down this road before. This is not our first venture.
Right.
And there has never been a time that we are not continuing to rise. And I don't believe that it will be this time either. Now, will there be a whole lot of issues? Yes. Will there be a lot of consternation? Yes. But anger that breeds bitterness makes inertia. We cannot become an inert people. We must continue to make sure that we are the strategists and the tacticians who we have always been, and we can begin to make a difference in our community as we band together, not without the people who are concerned and who may not be black, but we band together in that collective and say no to this systemic stuff that is going on that is so antithetical to making America the great place it can be for each of us.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the way she just answered that, her last few words there, There is no more powerful way to close out of this interview. People understand this is just the precipice. We have only just begun to embark upon this conversation, but the challenge that I pose for each and every one of you out there listening in, not only go and pick up this amazing book. Again, it's called Through the Eyes of This Black Woman Continuing to Rise. And this black woman happens to be named Dr. Thomasina M. Portis. Not only pick up copies of this amazing book, but my challenge to all of you, have conversations with those around you. Just start to talk to people. And listen, again, I know that conversations of this magnitude can tend to get heated, especially when you're talking to individuals that aren't like-minded like you, that don't have the same experiences as you. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Because listen, the only way we are going to see real change, and maybe this is the optimist in me, is it's like any relationship that you find with your loving partner. The only way you're improving that relationship is through effective communication. The only way we improve our society is through that exact same thing. Effective communication is key to all of this. This book is the precipice. You are going to continue to be that catalyst for change. But it starts with us. And I know times, especially right now, they seem bleak. But like Dr. Portis has said, I wish I could say I was surprised by the election a few weeks ago. I wasn't. Unfortunately, I was not. I was hoping for something else, but I wasn't surprised. So now it's time for us to, again, we hit the reset button. Now it's time for us to continue to get back to that drawing board, continue to communicate with one another, and let's make some positive changes. Remember, it's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's drtmp.org. Also check out the bookstore in Toronto, Maple Staple Bookstore. While you're at it, check out her other book, Music Matters, A Universal Language and Ministry. I really wanted to go into her other book as well, because just that title right there, and someone that I'm not a musician myself, but I do come from a family of musicians, and I have a very strong background in understanding the importance of music and how beneficial music can be if implemented in certain ways. That was something interesting that I wanted to talk about, but I thought that this conversation was needed. So listen, head on over there, pick up your copies today. Let's start speaking to one another. All right, let's get to work here. Mama. Dr. Portis, you are the absolute embodiment of a person of distinction. Thank you so much for the wonderful words of wisdom, for the history lesson you've been able to provide for this amazing book. But thank you even more for being a guest here with us to discuss it on People of Distinction.
It is my pleasure, and I thank you so much for the invite. This has been an amazing, amazing day. Thank you.